Okay. Hello, everyone. It's noon, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to our back to school webinar, Screens and Wellbeing, Tech's Role in Back to School Mental Health. My name is Alanna Powers, and I am the Research and Program Specialist here at the Family Online Safety Institute. So for those of you who may not know, FOSI is a nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit organization that works to make the online world safer for children and their families. We work in what we call the three Ps of online safety: enlightened public policy, robust industry best practices, and good digital parenting, which is what we will focus on today. So one of my favorite parts about my role is that I'm able to speak to both parents and kids about all things tech and online safety. It's likely not a surprise that we often hear about screens and mental health during these conversations. As we navigate this back to school season, there are a lot of questions about mental health, tech, and how all of that relates to back to school. So, to answer some of these questions, we've called upon some of the best experts in the youth mental health space. For our first panel of the day, we will talk to professionals in the mental health and digital world. For our second panel of the day, I will turn things over to Lindsay Fleming, LPC, to moderate a discussion with four teenagers who are all starting new school years themselves. At the end of the second panel, we will have an audience Q&A for about 10 minutes. Please drop your questions in the Q&A box as you think of them, and we will address them towards the end of the webinar. To be clear, this Q&A session will include both our professional and youth panelists, so feel free to direct your questions to either group. So without further ado, I'll ask the first panel to join me on screen and introduce themselves. Amazing. It's nice to see you all. And Patricia, we'll start with you for introductions.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you, Alana and Fosi, for gathering us to have this really important conversation, and to everyone who has taken time out of their day to join us, our young people. I'm Patricia. I am a licensed social worker, and I'm also the mental health policy manager at Discord.
And Claudia, we can turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much. As Patricia said, thank you for inviting all of us to be here. We're thrilled to have this conversation. My name is Dr. Claudia Fernandes. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Director of Research and Evaluation at Born This Way Foundation. I also serve as an assistant clinical professor at the Yale Child Studies Center.
Amazing. And Nicole, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited to be here and excited about this conversation and to learn from all of you here and to share this information on an important topic. My name is Nicole Owings-Fonner, and I'm the director of the Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health at the American Academy of Pediatrics. My background is in clinical psychology, and I've been studying and working on social media and other technology platforms and how it relates to health. So thank you for having me.
Amazing. And Dr. Turner, we'll wrap up with you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again for having us here for this very important, timely topic. I am Dr. Shairi Turner. I'm the Chief Health Officer at Crisis Text Line. We provide free 24/7 mental health support, crisis intervention. I am an internist and pediatrician by training with a background in trauma and public health.
Awesome. So clearly we have some of the best experts in the room to tackle this conversation. So I'm so excited to get started. So to start, I want to hear from each of you, and just ask, what are you most excited about this school year from a mental health and digital standpoint mostly? And then also, what are you most concerned about? And I thought we could start this question with either Dr. Turner or Nicole, because I know obviously you're both in this mental health space, but you're also parents who recently saw your own kids back to school.
Yeah, I'd be happy to start. So yes, I have two young adults now. My daughter's 20, my son is 21, but I very much remember these back to school times. And this year, I think I'm really most excited to see that Schools are starting to focus on the importance of well-being, integrating some mindfulness practices, mental health education. Some are even having dialogue around discourse, right? Telling kids how to communicate with each other. Also seeing some positive shifts with educators using digital platforms to build communities and enhance learning, share ideas. So there's a wealth of ways to use social media positively, but obviously the concerns are there as well, which we are here to talk about too. At Crisis Text Line, we've seen an increase in bullying. There's like a dip in conversations around bullying and cyberbullying during the summer months that then surge during the school year when the school year starts. So for the past 3 years, conversations about bullying have increased. And in addition, we're seeing conversations about anxiety, academic pressures, and relationships are also a challenge for these students. And we have to remember that these are the students who have lived through the pandemic, right, through some of their very early years, and those that were isolated for the full sort of 2.5 years are really struggling, I think, at this point.
Yeah, that's a great positive. I've heard of mindfulness rooms, mindfulness days, things like that. But then obviously there is that negative as kids are seeing each other again and that spike in cyberbullying. So thank you for raising awareness. And I saw, and you'll see throughout this chat that FOCDC will be posting links as our panelists talk about them. So in the audience, if anything speaks to you that you want to check out further, feel free to click that link as well. And Nicole, I'll hand it over to you to go next on this question.
Yeah, thank you. I think when I think about back to school and fall, one of the things we get to think about as families, and I have two teenagers, two teenage boys, we think about new schedules and new activities and starting the year fresh. And I think it's a really good time for you to think about how you can reboot or reset your relationships with technology and screens as well. And so it's a great time to come together to create a family media plan, to revisit any plans that you had from the past, to talk about what was working well, what didn't work so well. One of the things here at the center that we're really focusing on is thinking about the concept of crowding out and then crowding back in. So what are some things that you feel like screens might have been taking up too much time and you were losing as a family? Do you want to bring back in family dinners? Is it bike rides? Is it cooking together? Like, what are those things that are really important to your family, and how can you bring them together as you think about your child's schedule now that you have a new opportunity to kind of reset? And then I think also when I think about concerns for the year, it's sort of like with teenagers and adolescents and even preteens, like how do you strike that balance between encouraging them and supporting them and empowering them to be able to tackle things on their own without doing it in a controlling way or in a way that feels like they don't have any say or that they're not going to be able to handle it on their own. And so these are things that we think about as we start the new school year. What do we want our family situation and our interaction with media and schools and how we do homework look like? It's a great time to have those conversations and reset.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think throughout this conversation, we'll hear a lot about balance as well. And the theme of our annual conference this year in December is actually from protection to empowerment. So that's something that we're trying to figure out as kids age, how can we empower them while also making sure that they're safe, and how do parents figure that out as well? So that's a great thought, Nicole. Thank you. Claudia, I'll pass it over to you. What are you most excited about and most concerned about for this school year? Oh, you're on mute.
Apologies. We are most excited about the idea and concept of building communities. I think we have an opportunity here. We know that young people prioritize their mental health, and we also know that they want resources and platforms to support themselves and to support others. And we do that through building community. And building community happens in person, in the physical environment, in schools, and it also happens online. So really thinking about how do we create safe, inclusive communities for our young people, and also thinking about digital tools that can teach them the skills to safely support one another.
That's great. Thank you. And then Patricia, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. I mean, everyone has said such great things. I really echo what Claudia mentioned on building communities and how that happens both online and in the physical space. I know here at Discord, to get us excited about back to school and really lean into it, we were able to release a couple of tools and resources, our Guardian's Guide and our Teen Charter. And our Teen Charter, we thought about it how there are young people who are going back to school and they're learning new rules and new norms on navigating their classroom. And so we have something that we wanted to present ourselves, and it lists out 4 principles that young people told us directly through global focus groups on how they expect each other and how they expect Discord to provide space, like safe experiences for them online. So I'm really excited to learn more and hear more from young people on our teen charter, how we can continue iterating on those spaces online for them to build that healthy community.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you both brought up community because I think we hear a lot about how building community offline is great, but online is amazing as well, and how many young people really value those online communities to maybe bolster the interactions that they're having in person or reach out to people that maybe they don't have access to in the real world. So that's amazing, and that's something that's definitely super exciting. So slightly similar question, a little bit more classroom focused. So each year it seems that schools integrate a bit more tech into the classroom. And of course, this can be really great. It teaches kids things like digital and media literacy, and it hopefully gives them a better understanding of how they can use technology in a professional setting as well. However, are there any downsides to this increased use of digital in schools, especially approaching this question from a mental health perspective? And Claudia, I'll start with you here.
Well, with everything, there's always a downside, and it's taking into consideration what and how it could potentially impact. And too much of anything is never good. That being said, I don't want us to recognize that digital tools, resources often have the opportunity as well to teach young people skills in a safe space that allows them to practice the skills and then engage in them and apply them in real world settings such as the classroom. And so I use that example. I'll use the example of our Be There certificate. So from our research at Born This Way Foundation, we learned that young people often seek support from their peers. And so in recognizing that they often seek support from their peers, we, along with Jack.org, created the Be There certificate. And the Be There certificate teaches young people how to safely support one another through the 5 golden rules. And the 5 golden rules are: say what you see, show you care, hear them out, know your role, and connect to help. Right. And so what's important to recognize is that the school community is a large web of, it's not just in the classroom that we need to focus on. We need to focus on peers, trusted adults, and our families, so that what happens inside the classroom can allow our young students to thrive.
I love that. And I love that positive outlook as well. And my next question was asking the inverse. So I'm so glad that you were able to cover that as well. And I love the 5 golden rules. I think we should all keep those in mind throughout our lives, not just when we're kids as well. So that's great. So I want to move on a little bit and continue to talk a little bit about ed tech. So, like we were just saying, it's obviously becoming quite commonplace in schools. I don't even know if becoming is the right word. Ed tech has been around for quite a bit now. But there's also been recent pushback on devices in the classroom. And particularly in this case, I'm talking more about like personal smartphones. So school districts across the country are implementing classroom phone bans, which essentially make it so phones must be put away during academic instructions. So I wanted to ask you all, what are the implications of rules like these? And Nicole, I want to start with you here.
Yeah, I think it's a really great question and something that we're just sort of beginning to see the research on outcomes of different bans and proposals. And so I think it's going to be really important for everyone in the education space to be tracking those outcomes as schools are implementing policies. But one thing I think we do want to think about is, where is the youth voice in these decisions? How are we incorporating how they want to be using screens and why they were using screens to begin with as we make changes and as they make changes in the classroom specifically. And so, what is it that they were using the screen for in their phone? Are they using it to deal with some emotions and stress in school? Are they using it to connect with their peers and plan activities? And so if it is any of these things, we need to think about, okay, well, if you remove that, how are they going to do those things? And so do they need other activities in school to help them deal with emotions, to take a break, to connect with their peers as sort of a recharge during the day? How is that happening? What is replacing them? And along with the youth voice, thinking about the parent voice too, because it's those parents who are going to help their students to follow those policies. And so there's got to be some buy-in there. And so I think it's just really important to be engaging all parties as you make these decisions, from what the research is showing us, from what youth wants and why they're using them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I'm thinking in terms of like the parent's voice, it must be tough on them for a big change like this too, because you're used to being able to contact your kid all the time, and now for 8 hours a day you can't contact them. So understanding that it would probably be a big transition, not just for the kids in the classroom, but for the parents at home or at work or whatnot as well. Does anyone have anything to add to this discussion about phone bans?
I would. One of the things at Crisis Text Line, since we are text-based, we are a resource for students on their phone in school where they could reach out for support if they're having a panic attack or anxiety, and they can be texting, right, if they have access to their phone and receive that support without their peers necessarily knowing. And that gives them that confidential space, that safe space in the middle of a school day, so they might be able to continue till they get home. But taking that away, again, I think absolutes are really hard. I loved what Nicole said, and Claudia too, about skill building, right? So we may be taking the phones away in the classroom, but are we really teaching them how to create boundaries, right, around your time, around your space, so that as they mature into adulthood, they know how to coexist with work, with home, and a phone? And I think if we just sort of wholesale remove it, we're not necessarily teaching those skills, those impulse control skills as well.
Right, that's a great point. And I think we say a lot, phones aren't going away, tech isn't going away at this point. So, and implementing too, maybe online safety tools. So do not disturb, app limits during certain times of the day, things like that, that younger kids can work with their parents on, and maybe older kids can implement themselves, which we do hear a lot, kind of like this self-regulation as they get into their teen years as well. So those are both really, really good points. And Dr. Turner, that actually leads right into my next question, which is, I think we knew that we would talk about this a little bit, but 2024 has been, a huge year when it comes to correlating poor mental health to social media use specifically. And I'd love to understand, how do you feel about this overall conversation? And how would you advise parents and educators to approach this idea as we start the new school year? And Patricia, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because as you mentioned, you are a licensed social worker, and now you're somebody who works within the tech industry as well.
So, putting on my pediatrician hat, right, we know that adolescence, really brain growth and development, starts in utero and goes all the way into our early 20s, right? So, the impact of social media, of utilizing these apps, these tools, the algorithms that come at students and young people can really create experiences during this developmental period when their minds are still growing and developing. And we're already starting to see the data around that, where it's impacting behavior, it's impacting cognition, the neurobiology, the socioeconomic, the socio-emotional issues that some young people may have, right? Like to be exposed to, other people's lives, to the negative things that are going on, in the country without boundaries. I think it's very hard for a developing brain without the support, right? So the parental support is important, the school support is important to put it in context, right? So for young people of this age, um, there's no lack of information, right? The information is coming to them like a water hose, right? As adults, our job now, as opposed to like our parents used to provide information. Our kids are able to get the information wherever, however, whenever. But why we're here as parents is to really provide the context around it so they understand what it is that they're seeing, that they understand that, anything that's online is not always the truth, is not always factual, that you still have to be a critical thinker. So I think the dialogue and the communication that needs to exist between parents and their children, between parents and teachers, between teachers and students around this new world that we exist in is just going to be so critical to positively support the emotional and social development of children.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we talk a lot about at FOSI about the phrase "start early and start often" when it comes to discussing all things online safety, making sure that your kids know that there is an open dialogue, that you can have an open dialogue between the two of you, and you can come to each other with questions and learn from each other. So that's super important, and definitely something that we encourage parents to start as early as possible, for sure. Patricia, I'll turn it over to you. How would you advise parents and educators to approach this idea as we start the new school year?
Yeah, I really echo a lot of what Dr. Turner said. It's important that we're having these conversations because I think similar to what you said, Alanna, tech isn't going anywhere. But as we've seen with a lot of the advisories and the research that's coming out, that it's important to have this conversation with an element of nuance. As Dr. Turner said, we really don't want to lean into absolutes because it does more harm than good. And there are a lot of individual factors that go into the likelihood or the possibility of something being more harmful or not. There's research that suggests the way that folks engage online, whether it be passive or active, will also create a different experience. So there's research that suggests more active use will provide more of a positive experience versus a negative experience. And again, it's not something that you can sweepingly say for all young people or even all adults, right? We're also all on these platforms. But the type of platform matters. At Discord, we are really focused on creating real-time, authentic communities and communication to help build learning and friendships. And so it's keeping that in mind, like what kind of platforms are they on? To the piece of having conversations with young people, I love that we're championing bringing youth into this conversation, bringing young people into the conversation, because that's important. It's really important that we're not having these conversations around them, but that we're bringing them into it, that they also feel like their voices are heard, that they are able to share the differences that they want to see on the platforms that they're on. I have been so lucky enough to work with young people and hear from them directly on what they like and don't like. And if you engage in any of these conversations with them, they'll tell you exactly what they like about their favorite platform and what they don't like about their least favorite platform and what brings them there and what doesn't. And they'll share, maybe this platform is for more entertainment based, or I feel like I can be more authentic or be myself. And it's important that we just again include them here and make sure that we're elevating their voices, we're creating solutions, and that we're building with them for those solutions. And we're not just fully, putting a negative perspective or negative spin on something that some people might be finding really beneficial for their growth and their development.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I'm so excited for our stellar group of young people to join us for the second half of this webinar. And my other hat at FOSI too is doing our research, and we're diving into well-being in the digital world this year as well, and trying to really parse out where is digital really enhancing well-being for teens, and how are parents perceiving this and things like that, and where is it maybe do we need some work to make sure that there's still an element of well-being in what they're doing on their screen. So really excited to get into that research, which we will publish later this year in December as well. So Nicole, I'd actually like to hear from you on this question as well. So I know that your center works, closely on social media. Specifically, it's in your name, and also that you have a really robust youth council, some of whom are joining us today. So I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to, echo what both Dr. Turner and Patricia have already said about this being a very nuanced topic about wanting to balance safety with positive aspects. And I think as we think about including youth in the conversation and how we're talking about this subject, it really matters. I'm sure that you've all seen headlines, that a lot of people come at this as a very fear-based conversation. And you all work with teens, teens, like that does not necessarily land well. And for a lot of teens, it doesn't reflect their experience either, but no one really wants to be told that something that they enjoy so much and they use to connect with their friends is bad for them. It just shuts down the dialogue on both sides. And so I think making sure that we're using a language that is more open and trying to understand and seeking that knowledge and seeking that shared experience and meeting them where they are is really going to help in these conversations. And not just with youth, with parents as well. If you go into a pediatrician's appointment, if you work with another clinician and, all parents sort of anticipate that, oh, when are they going to ask me about my child's screen time? When are they going to bring that up? I don't want to talk about it. It's all bad, versus having it be a balanced, nuanced, meeting the family where they're at. What are some good ways to use screen time? What are some times where you prefer they not use it? Having that sort of balanced conversation is really important. And then working with youth, we hear from them that they want their parents to be curious about the things that they're doing, to ask open-minded questions. Can you imagine what the experience looks like when your parent asks you, like, can you show me what you're doing on this app? Like, what's the coolest thing you've seen today? Like, how are you using this to connect with your peers on this school project you're using? What is that experience like for you versus, oh, are you on your screen again? And like, what are we going to do about that? I think it's just another part of having young people in your lives and expressing how interested you are. And so here at the center, we've really worked on different conversation starters and prompts and dialogue that parents can be using with their teens that really opens the door for conversation versus shutting it down as if you're trying to control the situation.
Yeah, that's great. And that seems to be another emerging theme of our conversation. There's no absolutes on anything. So to say that everything you're doing is bad on your phone is just not productive. So having that open dialogue, as we talked about as well. And then I think it's interesting too, the idea of screen time versus screen use, and that different types of screen time are different. To quote our founder and CEO, he always likes to say, scrolling social media for 4 hours is a lot different than 4 hours on FaceTime with grandma. So there's these different things that you're doing on your phone, and that having that open dialogue between parents and kids is super helpful with as well. So to transition into our, oh, sure, go ahead.
I was just going to add another point too. So I completely agree with
Yeah.
everything Nicole is saying. And another strategy that I love to work with parents on is modeling approaches that, when you are on your phone, I'm going to use my phone right now and I'm going to scroll for 15 minutes. Okay, I scrolled for 15 minutes, saying and talking through it aloud, and saying, okay, now I scrolled for 15 minutes. I'm going to take my phone. I'm going to, put it on Do Not Disturb, and I'm going to put it in another room. Let's go have dinner. So modeling and talking aloud about those approaches are really incredibly helpful too.
Thank you so much for bringing up that point. And then to add on to that, the idea that if you set rules, household rules around devices, then you should follow them as well. So if there's no phones at the dinner table, to use the classic example, then you shouldn't be on your phone either. So that's an awesome point. Thank you so much for adding that. And then to move on a little bit. So as we know, good digital parenting, it focuses mainly on parents and caregivers, but understanding, as we've been talking about, how teens are feeling is paramount to then guiding these caregivers. So with that said, what is your advice to teens themselves as they navigate mental health and digital lives this school year? How can they utilize the resources available to them, like parents, teachers, counselors, etc., for support? And Claudia, I'm actually going to turn it back over to you because I know you're somebody who has school counseling experience.
Absolutely. So we know how important school climate is the culture of the community inside schools. We know how important that is for our young people. We know that helps. That's even a strategy for substance use prevention, because that's part of my background in research. And we also know it's important and absolutely critical for our young people and their mental health. So when we think about young people, and as I shared, and we think about the community inside schools, it certainly extends beyond the school. It also does include online communities. And prioritizing, as Patricia mentioned, prioritizing platforms that they think are cool, but also that are building and creating kind communities. And so we at Born This Way Foundation, we have the Be Kind 365. It's an accessible digital platform that helps young people practice intentionally how to be kind every single day. And we at Born This Way Foundation, we're rooted in the science of kindness. And so what we know is that from the science is that kindness does improve our mental health. So how do we create kind communities that are safe, inclusive, and welcoming? And what can we do? And there are there's different ways to send messages of gratitude to others and anyone in the world to remind people that they matter. There's an opportunity to practice other kind suggestions each and every day and recommend users in the platform to practice a kind act for inspiration. And then we also have a kind connector, which teaches them how to come together and do acts together to create a kinder and braver world that we're all building together.
I love that so much. Oh, that's like the perfect kind of social media platform. That's amazing. Wow. And then speaking of kindness, Dr. Turner, I wanted to turn it back over to you as well. I know you mentioned towards the start of our discussion the spike in, in-person and cyberbullying during this time of year. So I just wanted to see if you have any direct advice to teens as they navigate this or any resources as well.
So really, my advice to teens is to prioritize their self-awareness, right? Our bodies speak to us all the time when we are out of balance, when what we're consuming via social media or the news is negative and impacting us. We'll feel it in our energy, in our mood, in our sense of overall well-being. And what I really want teens to do is to pay attention to when their body is telling them something, right? And what their body is usually saying is time to take a break, set some boundaries, go out and interact with people in person, be selective, right? We talk about doom scrolling and just like this high volume intake of all the possible things that are negative in the world. And our minds are actually trained, historically, genetically to hold on to the negative more so than the positive. And so those things kind of sit and embed. And, the other thing is always know that it's okay to ask for help, right? So crisis text line, anyone, parents, teens, teachers can text hello to 741-741 and get support in English and in Spanish. And then we also have our mental health toolkit, which is our back to school mental health toolkit, which is on our website and available for parents, young people, administrators, so that we have those supports and those resources. But my main thing is listen to your body. As teens, you know when your body is not feeling right, and take a step back and ask for help, talk to someone, get outside, get some fresh air and exercise, and then see how you feel and just notice the difference, I think is so important.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Just really grounding yourself and seeing where you are is always such a good thing to do, and something that I think we forget about as well during our busy days, for sure. Patricia or Nicole, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I really just want to echo one of the last points that Dr. Turner mentioned about asking for help. In a lot of the conversations that I've had with young people, I feel like they're often like, we know what to do online, we know what's safe and what's not safe. And while that is true, these are folks who are like digital natives or growing up with all the platforms here. I just want to echo to the young people that it does not mean that they have to go through a lot of those sticky situations online by themselves. Just because there is this idea of I should know better doesn't mean that you have to then weather that storm by yourself. So, like Dr. Turner said, utilize resources like crisis text line to reach out if something feels off. Reach out to a trusted adult, reach out to a friend or someone that you can talk to. Again, just want to like emphasize, bold, underline, you do not have to go through any of these things alone online. Just because you should know better doesn't mean that you shouldn't still seek out the support that you deserve.
That's a great point. And we'll make sure to also put the crisis text line number in the chat as well for anybody who is interested as well. Nicole, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think those are all really great points. And I think kind of building on what Dr. Turner had said about taking control and sort of being intentional about your use of screen time. So taking that directly to screen time and social media and realizing that you have a lot more power over the controls and the settings than you might initially think. And so thinking about the quality of the content that you're viewing and your experience and how it's making you feel. And so if there's a platform that you use and you are feeling much better about that, like maybe that's where you devote your time. If you find that you're not feeling so great on another platform, maybe you take a break there. Like young people can figure this out, a lot of it on their own, if they're just intentional and you can plan ahead, setting do not disturb, setting controlling your feed, remembering that you can click on the I don't like that, don't show that, whatever the control is. And so I think just being intentional and knowing that you can have some control. It doesn't always have to be whatever the automatic auto feed settings are, and really thinking about what makes you feel good and connected, and not doing what is the automatic settings maybe on some platforms. I think that's really helpful in thinking about being mindful about what you're doing rather than just sort of jumping into it.
Definitely, especially when we were talking a little bit before the webinar started about how now we have homework again and all of those good things and times to study. So there's a bit less free time in the day for many young kids as there was before in the summer. So just making sure that you're intentional with your time and things like that as well is definitely good advice too. So also, it's important to mention that, of course, as we've been talking about, we're starting a new school year and there's all the normal stressors that come along with that transition. But in case anybody forgot, it's also a fraught election year. So that, along with other circumstances, can lead to, outside stress, which can then lead to poorer mental health. So, what would your advice to be to parents as they navigate not only a new school year with their kids, but also a turbulent time in our world? And Dr. Turner, I want to call on you first again, as I know you see a lot of outside stressors contributing to mental health through your work at Crisis Text Line.
Yes. So during this time, during these election periods, like stress and anxiety are big topics of conversation, I think, especially for young people, because it can become so divisive, right? And they have these conversations in the classroom, walking back and home, getting back to and from school or wherever they're socializing, and people have such strong views right now about what's right and what's wrong. And we as adults have to show them how to meet in the middle, but we're not always good at that either right now. So I think it's truly important for parents to recognize that not only are young people negotiating these conversations in the classroom, but they're also trying to balance them with their schoolwork, with their teams and athletics. And it can feel very overwhelming. So both acknowledging that for your teen, the stress, the concerns, asking about the dialogue that's going on in schools, giving them tools to have this discourse, have this conversation without necessarily getting angry, but in fact, just sharing ideas and information. And then again, seeking out help, because sometimes it can be so overwhelming when you and a very close friend suddenly find that you have diametrically opposed ideas about the election. That can be very jarring to young people. So again, reaching out for help and making sure you as the parent are checking in.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and just knowing that that's coming up in early November, so those discussions could definitely ramp up as well between youth and just throughout the country as well. So that's great. So we are almost out of time. I feel like we could talk all day. This has been an awesome conversation, but to wrap up this really great conversation, I want to quickly ask each of you, what online safety measures can we take to make sure young people have a safe, successful, and mentally healthy school year? So this is a great time to mention any further resources that maybe we didn't get to as well. And Patricia, I'll start with you here, as I know, like you mentioned, Discord has just published some really great materials on online safety and back to school season and all those good things.
Yeah, I before I jump into that answer for that question, I also want to just give some advice for the parents. And I just want to say that parents, your mental health matters as well. I had the opportunity to pen an article of a similar name for digital parenting, but y'all are also navigating a lot of things, a lot of changes with this election year, navigating the digital spaces for your young people. You know, the Surgeon General just released an advisory, I think a week ago, on the impacts of parental stress and how it's showing up, whether it be financial, basic needs, digitally. So I just want to say, like, do what you need for yourself as well. Know that that is another way of modeling, of taking care of yourself and being able to talk about what you're doing for yourself and for your young person to have that open communication with you and model. Sorry to go off there, but a little bit about some online safety measures. As I mentioned, I did talk about our teen charter. We also released something called our Guardian's Guide, which goes into further detail on some of our safety features, our initiatives such as Teen Safety Assist, our warning system. We know Discord can be a really overwhelming and sometimes confusing platform. And so part of what, like, taking control and understanding your young person's digital world and digital life is understanding a little bit more about these platforms. And I hope that this resource, our Guardian's Guide, is able to do so. I'll stop it there because I know we're getting close on time.
Thank you so much. And I'll find that blog post so we can throw that in the chat as well. That was super helpful information for Mental Health Awareness Month. So, Nicole, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's really helpful to reset at this time of year, as I mentioned earlier. And I think, utilizing the family media plan, the American Academy of Pediatrics, we have one that you can utilize if you don't have one yet for your family. I think it's also really important. We've been talking a lot really about teens, but a lot of these skills are built at a much earlier age. And so another resource that we've put together is to help children 10 and younger to build these healthy media habits at home. And so included is a bunch of different activities that you can do as a family, fun things like pop-up ad whack-a-mole, watching a family movie, sitting down and watching an influencer that your child may be interested in and talking about what that looks like and what the questions and conversations you can be having around that. And so just want to make sure folks are aware of that resource. And then for parents, we've created what we call the 5 C's of media. And it really talks about at different developmental stages, so ages of your child, what are some things that you can be thinking about in terms of having them have a healthier experience? talking about how your child is unique and what their personality, how it interacts with media, what is the quality of the content that they're watching, what are conversations you can be having at each stage. And it goes into a few other different ways to really think about this topic so that it's not so daunting for parents to kind of wrap their minds around. And so I really recommend both those resources for younger kids and then the 5 C's of media to really help give you a full picture of what this experience looks like depending on the age of your child.
Those are great. And thank you for mentioning the younger kids as well. That'll be super helpful. Claudia, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. And I love everyone's strategies and tips. I'll start the way Patricia started too, just by speaking to parents and caregivers and letting them know that you are not alone. We are all in this together. And truly, it takes a village. It takes a community to create safe and supportive environments around our young people. It starts with each and every one of us, and that's why it is so important for all of us to equip ourselves with the skills and confidence that we need to safely support one another. And I say that because one of my, as I mentioned earlier with the Be There certificate, our free online mental health literacy course, it takes about 90 minutes to take. My favorite golden rule, there are 5 golden rules, and one of the golden rules is the most important and I think most unique compared to other programs I've heard of, is it's know your role. And the importance of each and every one of us knowing our role and when to seek out support and additional services when needed. So that would be my tip and strategy, is take the Be There certificate and learn how to safely support one another.
That's awesome. And what a good course as well. Dr. Turner, we'll turn it over to you for online resources.
Okay, great. Well, crisis text line to start with. Again, anyone can text 741-741, text hello, received by a live volunteer crisis counselor who's supervised by our mental health professional staff. This is in English and in Spanish, free 24/7. And we're accessible also on web chat and WhatsApp. Again, our mental health school supply toolkit with all of the resources that are available to support anyone who supports a young person, a young school age person. And then, this being Suicide Prevention Month, I also want to talk about Always Ask, which is one of the things that we teach our volunteers. And it means that you can ask someone in a clear, kind, direct way if whatever the situation is they're talking about or experiencing is causing them to have thoughts of suicide, death, or dying. And it's really important to do that clearly and to know that you're not going to cause someone to then go and try to attempt suicide. In fact, you're actually saying, I'm here, I see you, I'm standing beside you. Let's find some resources. And I think that is critically important. And a lot of parents, I do believe, worry about being forthright about those questions and that conversation. And I think it can be life-saving if you open the door and really sit and talk about how your kids are feeling. And then lastly, we have our community resilience report, which speaks to what do young people in crisis need from their communities. And it was a report done on our younger people, teens, early 20s. What do they need? We know we're short of mental health resources, but they're looking for open spaces. They're looking for libraries. They're looking for team and athletic activities. They're looking for sports, the ability to connect socially. So if we can look at our communities and see how we can elevate and amp up and pour resources into that, we're able to support young people's mental health.
That's amazing. And thank you so much for that as well. So thank you all so much for your expertise. This was an incredibly informative conversation, and I hope it will help guide parents through the challenges and triumphs that come along with a new school year. So for our audience, if you have questions for these panelists, Like I said at the beginning, don't worry, we will have a 10-minute Q&A at the end of the webinar, and these panelists will be back on the screen at that time. For now, however, I'll ask that the first panel go off screen, and I'd like to welcome our second panel, our youth panel, to join us on screen. I'm going to pass moderating duties to Lindsay Fleming, LPC. Lindsay is a licensed therapist who works with youth, as well as a social media content creator and podcaster, working to destigmatize conversations about mental health. Lindsay, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. That was so many great tidbits. I was writing down notes the whole time you guys were talking. So I think we can definitely add to this conversation. And just like you guys were saying, the youth needs to be a part of this conversation as we talk about digital health for them. So I'm so excited to let them share their thoughts and we had talked a lot about what you guys are speaking about. So I'm really, really excited. I think it will pair very nicely. But to get started, I just wanted everybody to do a little bit of introductions. I'm Lindsay. I am a licensed therapist. I own a practice in Chicago, and I post on social media really trying to help teens with evidence-based tips and tricks around mental health. So there's a lot of information out there. I would like to be a space that's really coming research-based for teens. Like we talked about, that critical thinking of understanding what information are we receiving. But I would love for the teens here just to go around, and if you guys can introduce yourself, if you feel comfortable, where you're from, maybe what grade you're in, and then just if there's anything from what we had just listened to that spoke to you, or if you have a comment on something, I think that'd be a great way to start. So I'm going to start with Kemi. Would you want to begin by introducing yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kemi Ojikutu. I'm on the advisory board for Born This Way Foundation, and I am a high school senior in Pennsylvania. So, yes, to answer your question, one thing that especially stood out to me was about the phones in school and how schools are taking those away and trying to limit our access to, I guess, the internet and our distractions, which I has really been implemented in my school a lot, especially this past year. One of our buildings is completely phone free, meaning if you even have it out, no matter the reason, in class, the hallway, the cafeteria, it is not allowed and you'll get in trouble, which I understand from a student perspective of them wanting to make sure we're not getting distracted and that we're paying attention in class. But also, I recognize that myself and a lot of my friends use our phones to talk to each other, our parents, during the school day whenever something comes up or if there's an important matter at hand. And also, if we're stressed, to listen to music on the way to classes. And I feel like our schools are mainly recognizing the negatives of our phone and digital use and completely taking them away. But if we're going to take away the tools of our cell phones and the communication and stress relief that that provides, then we have to have other tools in place in schools to support us in those ways, which is why I love all the wonderful things that were said, and I cannot wait to explore them later.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like not a but an and. We understand that phones can be impacting us in especially some of those core classes and in other ways like listening to music during lunch or different times. Like if we need a break or we're overstimulated, that's a great space to use some of these coping mechanisms that we've kind of been embedded with for a long time when it comes to tech. Okay, Jeremy, would you like to go next? Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a junior and I'm the founder of the Teenage Handbook and also a member of Snapchat's Digital Council of Wellbeing. And I would say a point that really resonated with me was that the fact that teenagers are kind of looking for a community. So whether that be like a library or like a sports team. And I would say this point specifically, like I can relate with because I've kind of been through this certain experience when I was a new kid moving from Connecticut to California. And having the opportunity to join my swim team and build a community there really helped me get to know everyone better, and it really helped my mental health and well-being in general, not just digitally, but yeah, just in general. And I think that is something that I would also really like to stress to other people watching is that finding your kid or even yourself, finding a community where you can kind of be yourself and yeah, just connect with everyone, I would say is pretty crucial to your well-being. But yeah.
I'm hearing so much more from teens about loneliness, right? And comparison. We look online and we see all these people hanging out together. It looks like everybody's having a lot of fun. And so really creating those communities, whether it's online or outside of that, how do we make sure that we're kind of taking that step to put ourselves out there? I'm sure that was hard coming from a new school, and joining a whole team of people who might already know each other can be really intimidating. So I think that's great. Do you want to share a little bit more about your handbook or what you created? I think it's really cool and something that people might be interested in hearing about.
Yeah, sure. So the Teenage Handbook, it's a nonprofit, and our main goal is to actually give teens advice, not from their parents or from superiors, but from other teenagers. And this is again something that I found very helpful and wanted to share with other teenagers in the world. This advice can like range from anything from how to like from mental health help to how to manage like time, how to manage time properly, or just like yeah, digital wellness in general. And we've actually hosted our first competition this summer. And we had a good bit of entries, and we also took a survey, and I can talk more about those results later, but we took a survey on the participants, and we found some very positive insights about digital journaling and how that improves your mental health.
That is really cool. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And this goes back to the proof around teens going to each other for support, and that you can create these spaces where you guys are really good at supporting each other, but also creating pathways for when we need more. But how you just took that initiative and built this and how much it's impacted so many people is great to hear, and something that I think a lot of people can learn from as well. So thank you for sharing that. Jalen, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Jalen Garcia. I'm a part of the AAP's Youth Advisory Panel, and I'm a high school senior. And I really loved what all of you guys shared. But one thing that really stuck out to me that I really liked was what Dr. Turner said about self-awareness and to pay attention to when our body is telling us something. Because, like, of course, we know ourselves best, and like we know that something that when we're going to come across something, how it's going to affect us. So also, like, this world is very negative, so to have that self-awareness that what I might come across is going to affect me negatively, I can take a step back and avoid it. And I liked how she mentioned that it's okay to ask for help, because it is very true, and sometimes people feel wary about that, but it is truly okay. And to the reminder that you aren't alone is very reassuring.
Definitely. Yeah, it can be very hard to ask for help. And that's why I love when schools or places have great initiatives to meet teens where they're looking for help. And I love the texting, the crisis lines and things like that. I think that really allows teens a clear pathway and something they probably feel more comfortable with to reach out if they are feeling stuck or need support. Okay, Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, my name is Alexander Allen, and I am a high school senior. I am also on the American Academy of Pediatrics Youth Advisory Panel. I think something that really stood out for me was this focus on empowerment, and that teens will eventually, in the future, still need to figure out how to deal with cell phones, whether that be in a working environment, or in their personal life. And so even if we're banning them in the classroom or we're talking negatively about them in their youth, they're still going to need to figure out how to balance using the phones and completing their other things that they need to do once they graduate high school and go into adulthood.
That is such a good point. And I think sometimes the more we restrict something, the more we want it, right? And so then end of the school day, we get our phone and all of a sudden we are sucked in. And so really, how do we teach that responsibility aspect of like identifying when we're starting to doom scroll? Like, what's the difference between I'm scrolling and I'm doom scrolling? And with time management and all of these things, when we kind of chalk it up to like phones are bad, don't use them, we are missing out a lot on those skills of how do we recognize when we need a break from our phone or be able to utilize like better time management skills, because it's so easy to avoid as adults. It's easy to avoid things we don't want to do. So the teen brain and the impulsivity, it can make it harder, and we're missing out on teaching teens those skills. So with that being said, we heard a lot about how the transition to school starting can be a lot of change and increase I heard a lot about the increase in cyberbullying, also just time management, feeling like schoolwork overwhelmed. So does anybody want to share any thoughts on, as you go into the new school year, any thoughts on mental health and digital life and how it might look different than it did in the summer? Go ahead, Kemi.
So I can start. I want to agree with Dr. Turner when she said that anxiety is really rising because for me as a senior and a few of us, it's now college application season. There's the huge election and coming back to school, being around all kinds of people all over again during the summer can be a big change. Even though we do it every year, it's bigger this year because it's our last time. So one thing that I would recommend my peers to look out for is to make sure that you're not feeling surrounded. And because it's so easy to feel like, oh, I have all these things to do. This is happening. This is happening. How do I handle all of this? And it's very easy to feel surrounded and to feel alone. But there truly is so much out there. As we heard today, there's so many resources out there that are just waiting to help us and that want to help us. So I would encourage my peers to look and reach out because there's help.
Yes, that overwhelm and change is hard, right? Like the transition periods are really hard. And so how do we allow ourselves to have space for that transition time and remind ourselves we're not going to feel this overwhelmed forever and there are things we can do to help ourselves in throughout that time. Does anybody else have any thoughts on just when you think of the school year and mental health and how the digital health might play a role?
I can go. So I agree. Also, I'm a senior, so it's just really overwhelming than the past years. College applications, making sure my grades are okay, just everything, making sure that everything's in check. So I would advise to just remind yourself and your peers that it's okay to take breaks. Like some people may think like, no, I have to get this like right away, like I need to get this done, but it's really okay to prioritize yourself and your mental health first, and to take breaks is like a necessary thing.
Do you have anything that's like kind of your warning signs that, oh, it's time I need to take a break?
When I tell myself like that I'm going to like do this one assignment in a bit, like I'll say like, oh, I'll take maybe like 30, 15, 20 minutes on my phone. And I realize that I'm on there for like for like an hour. And then I'm just like, but I can't stop. So that's like a sign for me, like, okay, like I really need to like let this go. And I just like put my phone aside, turn off my TV, and just like lock in.
We're like creatures of habit, right? So if we find our habit being a little bit of like, oh, I want to get this done, but I keep avoiding it by doing other things, and a phone is a great way to distract ourselves. Like that might be a sign of like, okay, I need to make a change here and look at my look at this differently. Do I need a break or do I need to make some changes in my routine or schedule? That's great. Anybody else have any thoughts on digital health as the school year starts?
Yeah, I think just adding on to Jaden's point about time management, I think it's very important for teenagers to acknowledge that now that school has started, you also have a lot more responsibilities. And yeah, that's kind of like a blessing and a curse at the same time. But it is also school. So I also have felt the, I guess, consequences of poor time management, even as school has just started. But I think, yeah, we all have to kind of uh, prepare for the fact that we have a lot more responsibilities coming on and just understand that maybe, yeah, we have to spend a bit less time on our cell phones for free time and dedicate a bit more time to, yeah, getting ready for school.
So I hear a lot of parents tell me that, they think their kid is on screens, their teen's on screens too much, right? And that's why they're have missing assignments or this. And then it becomes kind of this argument, right? And there's a lot of like yelling, or we take the phone away and then assignments are done, and then we give the phone back and assignments aren't done. So are we really learning a skill or understanding how to use phones in a way that's beneficial? Do you guys have any advice maybe for parents on how to approach if they do feel like their teen is maybe online too much or it's getting in the way of their time management?
I can start us for this question. I would say don't be accusatory about it because I'm not going to blame any parents here, but some parents also can get sucked into their phones, just like us teens can. And so you also understand maybe like the feeling of kind of having to be stuck in that scrolling loop, or I just want to do one more thing or see one more thing on my phone, and then always having to see that last thing. So I would just say make it less to be accusatory because also the teen probably feels like, oh, I've been on my phone for way too long and probably also feels bad about it, but kind of is stuck in that little cycle of just scrolling through and trying to finish like one more post.
Yes, I think all of us have experienced that where I'm like one more video or 5 more minutes and all of a sudden time is lost, right? Yeah, so I think that's good. Definitely modeling. A lot of my clients tell me, my mom's like, get off my phone, but she's sitting there on Facebook for hours. So I think sometimes we forget how much as adults we're on our phones, even if we're emailing or doing work, we don't think of it as a problem necessarily, but as a teen seeing that, it's like, well, you're sitting on your computer all day and then you're yelling at me for being on my phone. Anybody else have any thoughts on like advice for parents or teens on how to help themselves? Yes. Kemi, go ahead.
So, on the subject of too much screen usage, that's definitely something that I also struggle with. But one thing that my parents are really good at is then, because, well, let me start by saying there's so much to do on our phones. Like, it's not just social media, there's TV, there's apps, there's games, there's like, you could probably spend an entire day on there and still be productive, but still on your screen. So, I would say to encourage and indulge their other hobbies outside of phone use. Like, I mean, we all have so many things we're interested in. So if they like gaming, maybe real life sports or in person, like board games and game nights, things that still provide that entertainment and the dopamine that we get from our online usage, but in the real world to help us reconnect and connect to nature, as we say. But yeah, going on walks, seeing movies, hang out with your friends, but in real spaces are all just really great ways that my parents encourage me to get off my phone and to reconnect.
I love that. That is such a good approach. And I know earlier we heard from the professionals too around just like learning what does your teen's phone usage look like. I often ask parents, who's your teen's favorite creator? What are they doing on their phones? And parents sometimes look at me and they're like, I don't even know. So I definitely think try to come at it with understanding and learning can be really, really helpful. And I know too, I think we've all talked about this, like checking our screen time can be something that we don't want to do. And even myself, and when I work with my teens and I'm like, okay, we're going to look, I'm like, this isn't fun for me either. But being like lighthearted and exploratory and curious with each other as a family, how do we be able to just have open conversations? And so we're not talking about phone usage only when we see there's a missing assignment or we see our kid has been on their phone all day. Maybe they had a hard day and that's what they need right now. So it's more about how do we have conversations in different times that don't feel accusatory or like you're maybe misunderstanding your teen. Okay. Um, is there anything that you guys find that your digital experiences or tools that you've implemented that has helped support your mental health? So on the flip side of over phone usage, like what are some things online that have been really helpful for you as a teen?
I think kind of like any community building app, whether it be like just even messaging, Discord, Instagram. I know these are all like large social media platforms that seem kind of intimidating or bad for your teen at the start, but if used correctly, uh they can also help create a community online for your teenager. And I think that's also the important thing between balancing screen time and like or like yeah, between balancing phone usage. And I think that's why it's important to also have screen time kind of as a tool to use, whereas you're also using all those big social media apps, because this way you can track yourself. You can acknowledge that you're spending this much time on each app. You can know that, yeah, maybe you're like benefiting from spending 2 hours a day on Instagram, but is that a bit too much? So I think with screen time, it makes you accountable for your own actions while still having the opportunity to yeah, connect with everyone online.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share about that?
Um, so I agree with like the whole screen time thing, and Like, for example, during quarantine, we were just surrounded by a bunch of technology and stuff. All we had really was just our phones and just like to be online. So, like for me personally, I was on TikTok for hours, like all day, and I just like came to realization I came to the realization like this is like kind of really bad for me. Like I should be doing something else, trying to make my time something that's not on screen. So like Apple has this like time limit thing. So I would set an hour time limit for me to be on TikTok. And that actually helped a lot. I don't use TikTok as much anymore as I used to, which is really well. So I think that the whole time limit managing screen time thing is really well.
It's like being aware of what's out there to help us regulate our time can be helpful. hmm Anyone else on like maybe ways that being online has helped you feel more connected to teens or like building a community? Sometimes I hear teens, if we don't feel as connected with our peers at school, that online we're able to find a space that we do feel accepted or connected. Has anybody had that experience? Kemi, I see you shaking your head.
Um,
Do you want to share?
for me, when I first got on Instagram, it was to follow the Hamilton musical account because I was obsessed, but none of my friends knew what I was talking about. And it's just like one of the big highlights that I see of social media, finding those communities online where you live in a place where, okay, no one knows what this is, whole online community, millions of people who also love the musical as much as I do, and we get to talk about it. I've seen people, like met people in real life that I've met through like comment sections. I'm like, oh my goodness, wait, we live in the same area. And just like talking about things that make us happy and just making friends did online and in person is just something that I've really benefited from on social media.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think too, I work a lot with teens who parents sometimes are like, go make plans with your friends, and they might be being excluded from a friend group or not feel connected to friends or, snap maps. They can see everyone's hanging out without them, and they don't want to be someone who's like always begging to be hanging out with people. So I think too, even if there's teens listening or maybe parents or anyone who works with teens around kind of saying like, oh, go out and find people to hang out with is really scary and hard. So I see it like group chats being excluded, all of these spaces. And one thing I talk a lot to teens about is how do we build friendships in a digital world. And so I think about how you can utilize things like sending someone a TikTok, if maybe someone in class and you're talking about a show, or Hamilton and you're like, here's this Instagram account that I love, or being able to like Snapchat someone where it's not, doesn't feel as much pressure of like, hey, do you want to hang out with me? But starting to build that foundation of creating friendships. Do you guys have any experience around using even a digital world to build friendships of people who are in your community?
I can join in on this question. I really like those examples that you gave, like sending a TikTok, or for me, I use Instagram Reels. Um, but doing that to share with your friends, I think especially in like a school community, when you're following all your other friends, and this is going to be maybe more specific to Instagram because that's what I use, but at least on Instagram, you can just search like someone's name who maybe you met in a class, and then you can follow them and you'll see more of their interests, and then you can maybe if they post on their story, you can then say, oh, this is so interesting, like if they're posting about their hobbies. And so it really lets you kind of connect on a way you may only see this person like for 46 minutes a day in one class period, but now you have like a better friendship, and maybe that'll also help you connect more in the class so you can actually have some friends in your classes who you feel comfortable talking to. And I think that's a really a huge benefit of social media because it really lets you connect in a different way with a lot of people who otherwise you may not know a lot about them, and you may not really know what they're interested in or what they're doing outside of those classrooms.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I'm trying to be mindful of the time as we get closer to like the Q&A. One question I think is really important to hear from teens about is oftentimes teens go to each other for support, and sometimes they're are things that we see online of people not being kind to each other, or if you are experiencing cyberbullying online. I think in the past, an adult might be around to be able to observe that, or you go home and you're in a safe space where you don't have to deal with that bully that maybe you had to at school. And now it's kind of an extra barrier layer of adults might not see what's happening or of people being cyberbullied. Teens might have a hard time identifying it as cyberbullying, or how do I take the next step of like, what do I do? What do I do if I see someone else being picked on online or made fun of? Or what do I do if I'm having an issue? And so I was wondering, do you guys have any advice for teens around if they are experiencing something negative online, how do we take that next step? Or if a friend comes to you and you're like, I feel this might be more than like a peer-to-peer that I can handle, how do you guys think about encouraging teens to take that next step to tell someone? Kemi,
Um,
you're smiling. Come on, give it to me. What are
all
you
right.
got?
So I can say that during middle school, like, coming out of COVID, really, my friend group went through like this hard period, sort of, and there was a lot going on, both on social media and in person. And I'm sort of our fixer friend, so like people come to me and sort of just rant and offload, and it was a lot for me to deal with. I wasn't even involved, but I can say that around that time is when I also got involved with Born This Way Foundation and got my Be There certificate, which was just a really great tool, especially with the Know Your Place rule. It was like 15 minutes. I remember I was sitting in this exact chair and I was just being reading this story about how like I am also just a child and like I need to be mindful of that and be mindful of like my role, understand that even though, yes, I want to help people and I'm their friend, I also have to be mindful of my mental health and take care of that. So getting your Be There certificate is a really great tool that helps you and just gives you a lot of tools to help other people have those conversations, know when you should step in versus when you should get um, professional help, and basically know the right things to say, and also affirm if you're already doing this, affirm what you're already doing and strengthen you in those ways.
Yeah, I think that's great and great resource for teens to have.
And I
Any,
would just like to quickly add on to what
yeah.
Kemi said. I think if my friend would come to me about cyberbullying, you really should think, is it worth your attention or your time? I know that's one of like the 5 C's that the American Academy of Pediatrics has about content. Is this worth your time and like continuing to try to have this relationship with somebody if it's clear that it's hurting you and affecting you? Because social media is really your space, and it's really like you don't need to have people who are negatively impacting your space online with you. So whether that be, I know Instagram as restricting, which is different than blocking, it hides the messages and you can hide your story. So if you feel uncomfortable blocking them, but since that is like your online space, you just don't need to include them anymore in that space.
I love that. I love that thinking about this as your space. And I do a lot of we do like a digital makeover or cleansing. I have a lot of my clients look through just online who they're following and how does it make them feel. Like it is our space and we do have some sense of control of who we are following and what's showing up in our feed. And I love the restrict because I think when you block someone and then they can find ways to know that you did that. So restricting is a great way where it's not just popping up in your face and you don't have to worry about the backlash. Any other thoughts on that before I go on to my next question?
I would also just like to add, for Snapchat specifically, if you see any malicious activity, the report button after the block is also always an option because reporting is the only way that Snapchat like gets its data based on like if something's going on here. So if you can see like people are harassing you or if there's like trying to be like just really bad things that can happen online, reporting in Snapchat is a really essential tool that they use to gain data. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. If your team does use Snapchat, it would be I would really appreciate it if you could let them know.
Yeah, I think that's great. I've had a lot of people like struggling with Snapchat specifically, so even that's helpful for me to know. Okay, so the last question I'm going to give, I would love you all to take time to answer it, is if you can share with me like one thing you wish parents, caregivers, or educators understood about mental health and digital use as we head into the new school year, or a tip that has helped you. And I know a lot of you guys have resources. So if you haven't said them yet, this is a great time also to give your resources. So I know I'm asking a lot of you, but essentially one tip for adults in our world around what you wish they knew about mental health and digital use, or one tip that's helped you, and then any support you have or resources. So would anyone like to go first, or I could just pick someone? Jeremy, go ahead. And I would love to hear about this data too. I'm still interested in what you found.
I would say probably the biggest thing that I've like resonated with or I found is that teenagers kind of accept help and take advice from other teenagers or other peers that they find a lot more relatable than their parents themselves. And I know that that's pretty difficult because obviously you're the parent, right? You want to like help your kid as much as you can. You want to give the advice because you've already been through this experience. But in reality, I feel like sometimes I myself at least can't really relate to my parents. And I've seen this happen across with a lot of my peers too. But I would just like to talk about the Teenage Handbook really quick about it as a resource because like our goal here, as I said before, is to get teenagers to give other teenagers advice. And what we found is that through digital journaling, um, about before teenagers started this process, about 50% said that they would like to have additional resources. But 100% of the entrants said that the creative process of digital journaling helped them with their specific issue. And actually over 80% of them said that they're more likely to reach out for help and for further resources after that process. So I think this shows that clearly digital journaling was a success in its own right, but it also like almost serves as a gateway to future resources and encourages teens to be more likely to reach out for help and resources after experiencing the journaling. So I think that was probably my biggest takeaway of our first year of the nonprofit.
That's great. That's so cool to hear and see how really being led by teens and then being able to show that not only did that activity help them, but also encourage them to ask for help in the future. So that's really cool to hear about. Alex, you want to go next? Just if you have a tip for adults or a tip for teens, and then any resources you have.
Sure. So just a quick tip. I think really this is a tip for everyone. You can go through all of your privacy settings. I know this is what one of the experts on the expert panel mentioned earlier, but going through all of those settings and seeing, do I really want to share these by default? I know Instagram has sharing your status if you're online by default, and Snapchat has snap maps. I don't know if those are by default or not, but still checking if you want to turn off those different settings to secure your privacy. Something I do is also having a self-care feed. So I know you can tell different platforms, I'm not interested in this content if that is maybe something that's maybe political content or any content that makes you feel uncomfortable to be online or doesn't give you positive experience on social media. So I know there's called like a self-care feed. And what I have is one that's like all cats and like cute pets that really keeps me happy to be on social media and in that space.
That's really cool. That's a great tip. Jalen?
Yeah, so a tip that I would like to give is for like parents or educators to just communicate with the teen. Communication is a really big thing. It's also one of the AAP's 5 C's of media use, communication. So just communicating with them, getting their insight on how they feel about social media, how they see it, and what they're going through personally with social media, that could be really well. And for teens, a tip that I would like to give is just to protect their privacy on social media. Obviously, like it's really easy to find stuff about you through like what you let out. So to just be careful with that and to make your feed a positive space. Don't like look to the negative things. There's like the not interested button on Instagram. I know that, as well as TikTok. So you can really like create your feed to be something more positive.
Yes. Kemi?
So, my tip for everyone is to remember that a lot of us spend so much time online because that's what we have to do. So, creating healthy habits or things to switch to, hobbies, other interests that you have outside of what's on your phone is really important to make sure that when you do eventually decide to, all right, I'm not going to spend time on my phone, you have something else to spend that time on, and to also help build the habit of doing other things than just being online.
Yes. I think all of that is really, really helpful. And I think sometimes adults assume teens don't see an issue with being online too much or phone usage. And I think you guys have done a really good job of talking about how it is a balance and learning how to regulate that usage. And also, there's a lot more that goes into it, like talking about privacy settings and getting outside and also just like making sure that if there are things or people we don't want to see, that we're able to take that off our feed. I think these are things that some adults don't know about the apps that could be really, really helpful to support teens in their life. So thank you all for being here and sharing all of your insights. I think that's really great.
Okay, I think we have time for about two questions. So if everybody wants to come back on the screen now, that would be awesome. Thank you so much for all those insights. That was awesome. It's so great to hear from you, and thank you for taking time in the middle of the school day as well. So first question is actually directed at Nicole. So, Nicole, you mentioned reviewing the settings on social media platforms. Are you aware of good educational resources that give teens and parents technical literacy skills?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, one of the things that we're currently working on is a glossary of social media platforms. And we will be releasing that at the end of this month. So I say stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, there are a lot of other great resources out there. I just put our short URLs in the chat. I know someone said that they were having a little bit of trouble with the longer URLs. But if you go to just our center website, you can find a lot of resources there. And one I specifically want to highlight is our question and answer portal. Parents, caregivers, teens, whoever can come and ask questions similar to the one you just asked and find great responses. And so there's the short URL. But I wanted to direct folks specifically to a question that we got on how to control your social media feed. It was asked by a youth, by a teen, and we responded to it. And so if you go to that specific question, you'll find guidance on 4 of the most popular platforms for how to control your settings. I know that Alex described some of that in in the youth portion, but we go into detail how to do that. Another great place for resources is Common Sense. So if you're not familiar with Common Sense Media or Common Sense Education, they also have some really great tutorials and blog posts about how to walk through settings on a variety of different platforms. So I really recommend Common Sense Media, Common Sense Education, and then the resources you can find at our center's website. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm so excited for that glossary. I'll say too, on more of a device level, we have our online safety cards for kids, so you can fill those out between the parents and the child. And it's more device, so like tablet and smartwatch and smartphone and things like that. So those can be helpful too, just to start the conversation. And then I'll also say like a lot of apps and platforms have like pretty robust safety centers, thankfully, but to have that in that glossary that AAP will release soon will be really great. So this next question is more directed at the youth panel. So how do teens feel? So you can just talk more about how you feel personally about age verification and sharing their age with apps. So this is basically like when you join an app, and it asks you typically if you're 13 and above. That's a debate. Is that like a good way for age verification to work? Things like that. So this audience member is just interested in hearing your thoughts about how you feel about sharing that information.
I think that age verification is actually a really necessary thing because, well, personally, well, I'm 17 right now, but like when I was younger, I got exposed to social media really young, and I had social medias like at the age of like 7. And I didn't like think, I don't think age verification was a really like big thing around that time. And maybe they should take more measures to like make sure that you're actually like telling the truth, because obviously I didn't at the time. So I was just exposed to like a bunch of things that I feel like affected my mental health growing up because I just grew up around social media. So I think age verification is actually a very necessary thing to have in apps.
That's great, Jaylene. Thank you so much for sharing that. Jeremy, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think there needs to be more accountability in age verification. And if you know your kid is signing up for an app that they don't meet the requirement for, you should probably not allow them to. In my personal opinion, because I believe the verification and the age requirement is there for a certain purpose. And you should probably just like listen to that because in reality, yeah, I think having Instagram or Snapchat at like 7 isn't exactly very healthy for your kid. And I'm not like trying to say anything bad, but I'm just, yeah, I just don't think it's the best to have too much exposure at a young age.
Right. And that's a great circling back to what Jaylene said in terms of just making sure that you're not exposing yourself to things at too young of an age and making sure that parents are cognizant of that as well. So we are at time. I felt like this flew by. Thank you all so much for joining and for your insights. This was such an awesome conversation. Thank you to the audience for your thoughtful questions and participation. A recording of this webinar will be posted on our YouTube in the near future. So feel free to watch out for that and share it far and wide. We'd definitely appreciate it. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day and happy back to school. Thank you so much for your time.